So today on episode 2, diagnosis, we're going to talk about the process that John and I went through to gain the diagnosis and the call that we received with the diagnosis and what we did from that point onwards, really. We did a lot of research and spoke to lots of people, including my guest today, Caroline Turner, my good friend. She's going to talk a little bit about our first sort of conversation that we had and what we did to really make that decision about the diagnosis that we had received and the point where we found out that Lucy was going to be a little girl, and we started thinking about what Lucy might be called and things like that. And really just the discussions we had with friends and family. And the point we got to where we announced our pregnancy to the world. So when I had received the call from the hospital with the diagnosis that Lucy would have trisomy 21, Down syndrome, we started to do lots of research. Obviously, you start with Google and that doesn't bring up fantastic results still even today. So you do start to panic and you feel like you need to reach out to people that are in this situation, in this position. And I was lucky enough to come across Caroline's details. I think the first person I spoke to was a friend of a friend, Beverly Dean. And Beverly had an older son who has Down syndrome. At the time, I think he was about 15 or 16. And Beverly was very well connected within the community in the Northeast of families who have children with Down syndrome. And she put me in touch with Caroline Turner. She explained that Caroline was on the board of Down syndrome Northeast and that Caroline had a younger child, a little boy with Down syndrome, and that perhaps a conversation with Caroline would be a good start for me, really, to start thinking about the decision we were making, because the hospital asked us to make a decision over that weekend. It was the Easter weekend, and they rang us on the Thursday, late on the Thursday, 4 p.m, and said we needed to ring them by 10 a.m. on the Tuesday with a decision whether we would be carrying on with the pregnancy or whether we would be terminating the pregnancy. So it was very intense and lots of thoughts, lots of feelings. And I am the sort of person that finds it really helpful to talk things through with people. So, like I say, chatting to Beverly, Beverly introduced me to Caroline and gave me, asked, I think, if Caroline was happy for her contact details to be shared, which she was. And I gave Caroline a call, I think maybe sometime on the Friday. I think it was the Good Friday we spoke, wasn't it?
I think so, yes. Yeah, over the Easter weekend.
Yeah. And I think I just rang you, knowing me, probably bombarded you with questions.
You probably did, yes. I think from what I recall, very different conversations that I've had with other parents, whereas quite a lot of parents, want the information from me, and I find myself talking quite a lot and relaying everything about my life with my son and what I do for Down Syndrome Northeast. But I think you were quite keen to tell me everything about you and talk about you and ask yourself and ask lots of questions, which is good, because it means that, you're getting the information that you need. But it's the most important thing is about reassuring you that life was not going to be an absolute disaster. It was going to be all fine, which was the most important part of that phone conversation.
It absolutely was. And I think what I found, Caroline, was you do have that kind of manner. You are very calm in a stressful situation. You were very reassuring. And I do remember thinking everything's going to be okay. And before I made that call, I don't think I really felt like that. I think that was the first time on the phone to you, because we did talk for quite a long time, I think, didn't we? And I think during that process, I started to relax a little bit and think, and, feel less panicky and think, yes, we can do this. We will be able to cope, because you told me about your life with Leo and your, and your eldest son? And
Well, we have a relatively, for us, normal family life. It's our normal, and you'll have discovered it becomes your normal family life. But I think at that point, when you get that information given to you that baby's going to have Down syndrome, you don't actually have that in your thought process. And I know that as a parent from having had that antenatal diagnosis myself, the same way that you did. And it is something that takes quite a long time to process. I think the only way that you can really do that properly is by being able to talk to other parents who have a child with Down syndrome. And I was lucky enough to have that opportunity myself with another family whose little one is now not so little, is quite a bit older. And they're another local family to me. And I got the opportunity to have a chat with them and to meet them. And I just think that gives you a whole different perspective on the expectations that you're going to have, because as a parent, an expectant parent, you probably had those feelings of fear and those feelings of uncertainty and what the unknown was for the future, what this actually meant for your lives. And I think, so the most important thing for me when I talked to parents and when I spoke to you was to make sure that you were reassured that you were going to have a normal family life. And that's the key to it, is to make sure that parents do know that's and part of it as well is just really making sure that parents understand that they're going to be so proud of their child and their child is going to be so loved. And I think that, again, those antenatal diagnoses, I think a lot of parents don't see that or feel that at the time. They just feel fear. So that's a really important thing to get across to parents, and that's what I tried to do. I hope I did that successfully for you.
And I do remember you talking about something that I then talked about a lot going forward, which is celebrating the milestones much more than you potentially would with a typical child.
Yeah.
Because it is harder for our children to reach those milestones. I remember you talking about, Leo doing his Makaton signing, that kind of thing. And Lucy, has come on the same and has been able to communicate through Makaton before she could use any words. And that sort of thing, I'd never heard of Makaton until you started telling me about it. And again, I think I asked you lots of questions once you mentioned it because I'd not heard of it. And I think during that discussion, that's when you started to signpost me to places I hadn't come across. I remember you saying something about, stop Googling, Laura, don't Google, talk to people and go and look at things that we recommend. And you were the one that recommended that I went and looked at the National Charity Positive About Down Syndrome, as well as telling me about what Down Syndrome Northeast were doing locally for families, and the fact that you deliver baby boxes to individuals in their homes or via the maternity units. So while we were talking, you were telling me about the National Charity Positive About Down Syndrome, and you signposted me to the help that they could give me, and also what Down Syndrome Northeast do locally. And you now work with both of those organisations, which I don't think you did at the time. So tell us a little bit about that journey for you.
So I was already involved with Down Syndrome Northeast at the time as a volunteer and a trustee, which I still am. And we were just in the very early stages at that point during COVID of getting our baby boxes set up. And the idea behind that was just to make sure that parents had a really lovely welcome into the world for their babies, that they received the right signposting, that they got the information that they needed to signpost them to a range of organisations, and to make sure that their baby's birth was celebrated by the community and they were welcomed, that they knew that there was a supportive community out there of other families who wanted to kind of bring them close and look after them and had their backs. And so we wanted that to be, a really good part of how babies were welcomed into the world and that's how we did that for you. And you were one of the first to receive our boxes. So it was lovely to deliver to the house to bring you the baby box. So the baby boxes contain some handmade gifts, things like blankets. We work with a fantastic charity called Project Linus, who make handmade quilts for us. We have lots of volunteers who do beautiful knitting and crocheting. And also we include in the boxes some books. We have a book from Down Syndrome Northeast called Look at Me, which celebrates people in the Northeast who have Down syndrome of all ages. We have books from national charities like Positive About Down Syndrome and Wouldn't Change a Thing. And so we're really pushing that kind of that acceptance of people with Down syndrome and making sure that that information is shared with parents. There are some lovely little gifts, toys, some beautiful clothes, some little sensory toys in there. So it's lots of lovely little things to welcome the baby into the world and make sure that parents know that their baby's birth is being celebrated. So all the hospitals in the Northeast have them, which we're very, very proud of. And quite a lot of parents like to come and visit the hospitals and take them with me when we go and visit them, the hospitals and the neonatal units, to share the boxes. So Positive About Down Syndrome is a national charity, and I have been working for Positive About Down Syndrome for about 3.5 years. I'm lucky enough to be maternity manager, and so I work with hospitals across the Northeast and across the UK, in fact, to make sure that all of our resources from Positive About Down Syndrome are shared with maternity, neonatal staff, fetal medicine staff, and so on. I also deliver training as well to NHS staff across the country, not just locally. And it's a fantastic organisation to be involved with because it does something that other organisations don't. It's a parent-led charity. It's entirely parent carer-led. We're all experts by experience. So we have the experience of being parents to a child with Down syndrome. And that means that we know what that life feels like and what that lived experience is like. And I think that really gives us a quite a unique insight into what it's like to parent a child with Down syndrome. So yeah, that's the charity that I work for, and I'm really proud to be part of that and just share what the organisations do with parents like you, Laura.
Absolutely. And, I don't know what I would have done without Positive About Down syndrome. When it was those very early days, just after we spoke, I had a look on a couple of different charity websites, but I quickly came across the Facebook groups that Positive About Down syndrome run. And I went into the Great Expectations group. And again, like you say, the admins in that group were all parent carer people who had that experience of having children with Down syndrome that were maybe a little bit older. But there were lots of, mums to be in that group who needed to, hear those positive stories about things that, you might find out during the pregnancy. Like we found out Lucy was going to have a heart condition called a complete ABSD. And that Facebook group was one of the first places I went to say, this is happening. We've been told Lucy's going to have this. I need some experience from the admins of, what that's like. And then they quickly put me in touch with the Heart Buddies scheme that they run. And, they got me a heart buddy locally in the area, my lovely friend Katrina, who has her son David, who didn't have the same heart condition that Lucy was going to have. But even though I was still pregnant, Lucy wasn't even born yet, but Katrina was more than happy to chat to me about her experiences at the local hospital where we knew Lucy would have the surgery at the Freeman. And Katrina, again, like yourself, put my mind at rest a lot and reassured me and, made me feel like, it wasn't the end of the world and that we were carrying on and we were going to face this. And as John would often say to me, we're facing this together, Laura. We're a team. Try not to get emotional. And everything's going to be okay. And, and people like yourself and Katrina and other people locally and nationally through Positive About Down syndrome that I was able to chat to during my pregnancy just made such a difference to my acceptance of Lucy's diagnosis and my ability to then actually look forward to Lucy being born.
And one of the things that I do when I make the baby boxes, which I know does make a difference because some parents have told me that it does. There's a card in there, and the card has a little message about how, even though things might feel a bit scary and uncertain, unpredictable, you might really not know what's going to happen, you might be worried for the future. There is a promise from us at Down Syndrome Northeast that you will have a feeling of love and pride and joy that you couldn't possibly imagine for the child that you have, for your baby. And when you look back at the times that you felt that worry and that fear in those early days, everybody always says they wish they could go back and tell themselves that it'll be fine. And it always is. And it always, always is. And that's kind of a big part of why I like doing and want to do what I do, to support parents who are either with an antenatal diagnosis or a high chance result, or any of those situations in diagnosis, because they can't see it at the time, but I need them to know that it will be okay.
You do get a bit of a kind of, you go into a panic mode and you almost can't think straight. And you do need that sort of, steady, reassuring, it's going to be okay from somebody who's lived it. And, there were family members telling me that it was going to be okay. But hearing it from somebody like yourself made all the difference, because I thought, well, you don't know it's going to be okay. You've been through this to my family members. Whereas hearing it from families like yourselves, it just, it did really make a difference to how I then felt about Lucy being born. So at our 12-week scan, we were given a high chance of Down syndrome. Although they didn't use the word chance, they used the word risk, which is something you work on, Caroline, with maternity units, don't you, to change that language.
And that's really important, because the word risk has an element of fear in it, doesn't it? And to try and discourage that, because there's nothing risky about our children. So trying to encourage the use of that language, chance of having Down syndrome, is really important.
Yeah. So we had the high chance due to blood tests, and Lucy had a slightly increased nuchal fold on the 12-week scan. So that's why they wanted us to have further testing. They asked us what further testing we would like. Would we like invasive testing, which does come with a higher chance of miscarriage? The amniocentesis, or the CVS, doesn't it yet? At the time, NIPT testing, which is just using your blood, wasn't available on the NHS. But they did say there are local clinics in Newcastle that will do that for you. It's not crazy expensive. If you'd want to go down the non-invasive route and do the NIPT testing, you can do that. So at the time you had your diagnosis, did you have any NIPT test?
The non-invasive prenatal testing didn't exist. It wasn't a thing when
amazing.
Yeah.
Quickly forward, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I went for the NIPT tests, and I had first one. It took about 10 days to get the result back. It was a long 10 days waiting to find out that it was inconclusive, and they couldn't tell me why. They just said they can't tell from the blood. Can I come in and do it again? So I went in and did it again, and it took another week to get that second result that was inconclusive again. And they still, to this day, I don't know why it was inconclusive. I did my own research. It could have been to do with my BMI. I'm not entirely sure. But the nice thing they did for us, because in that process, they did 4D scans, which were amazing to see Lucy.
Oh, deep, gorgeous.
Sure. And it was a big part of my bonding process with her. So they'd done that for us, but they couldn't get us a result. So they did give us our money back, minus the cost of what we would have just paid to have the 4D scans, which I thought was fair enough. I rang the hospital in a panic. At this point, I really just needed to know. This was before I'd spoken to you.
Yeah.
This was, in the very early days, all I was doing was Googling and driving myself crazy and worrying. And all of the what ifs were really quite frightening. And as we've discussed, the NHS were using quite negative language with me at that point. So I did feel very worried. So I rang the screening midwives team, I think they're called, at the RPI. And she was lovely, actually. And she didn't use particularly negative language. She was quite calming and reassuring. And she said, look, it's the bank holiday weekend coming up. It's the Easter weekend coming up. If you can get in this afternoon, we'll test you this afternoon. You'll have to have an invasive test. It'll either be an amnio or a CVS. I think CVS is more invasive than amnio. I can't remember which way around it is. But I had to have the one that was more invasive because I had a front attached placenta, which up to this point I had no idea that I had that. But they, when the consultant, who was lovely, Gareth Waring, this was my first meeting with him, he practically held my hand both physically and mentally through the process. He was lovely. And he explained about where my placenta was, made it tricky to do the kind of more standard test at the point in my pregnancy that I was at. He had to do something that was a little bit more invasive, but don't worry, it'll be uncomfortable, but you'll be okay. And one of my friends at the time said, you're going to have to pull your big girl knickers up.
Yeah.
Let's get on with it, Laura. Because John had to work. It was his last day in his previous job. He couldn't get out of that work that he had to do. So I just had to go in there and get on with it. And we got the test result really quickly because it was the bank holiday. The hospital asked the life centre that do the testing to get the result back quickly for us. So I think I had the test on the Tuesday afternoon and we got the result on the Thursday afternoon. It normally takes more like 3 or 4 days, but they asked them to prioritise it for me because I think at that point, because I'd gone through the NIPT.
And you'd waited a long time, hadn't you?
Yeah. Already waited time at that point, and I was in a bit of a mess. And they were like, look, this lady needs to know one way or the other what she's dealing with. And the RVI rang me at something like 4 p.m. on the Thursday afternoon before the bank holiday. And like I said earlier, very quick phone call, kind of negative. It wasn't Gareth that made the call. When I spoke to him the following week, when we went in for our scan, he did say if I'd have made that call, I wouldn't have been as negative as the gentleman was with you. I asked that gentleman to go back through some training and refresh on the language, and because it was a very quick call, it was pretty negative, and just make your decision. Let us know what that decision is next week. And quite dismissive of me, really. And me, I was asking lots of crazy questions like I do, trying to understand and trying to think of what our options could be. And he just was, you either decide to carry on or you don't. Let us know on Tuesday morning and put the phone down. Which I hope won't happen again. We haven't heard of it happening again, have we, through people coming to Down Syndrome Northeast recently?
Not locally, we haven't, but it happens. It does still happen nationally. Yeah, people get that pressure.
Work that you're doing through charities like Hospital about Down syndrome, and the reason why I'm doing a podcast about it is to try and spread that more positive message so that people, even people in the medical profession, hear and understand how important that language is. While we were on that call, Caroline, I was asking you lots of questions, and I do remember you telling me to stop Googling because the questions I was asking were related to Google results that weren't really that accurate or that realistic. And you gave me a couple of documentaries to look up on YouTube that you felt would help.
I mean, the one that was very current at the time was the Sally Phillips documentary. Because Sally Phillips is an actress who most people will have heard of. She has a son called Ollie who has Down syndrome. And Sally is a very vocal public figure in terms of raising awareness about Down syndrome. And at the time, she'd done a documentary because it's quite it's quite a different experience in different countries in the world when you have a child with Down syndrome. And one of those was around countries such as Iceland, where there are no people with Down syndrome, because people are offered the screening tests, and as soon as they have a positive screening test, people choose to end their pregnancies. And that's not the only country in the world that happens. There are other parts of the world as well where screening is a quite significant part of the expectation that you will then end your pregnancy. And families across the world do have really different experiences. And so Sally just wanted to raise that awareness and talk to people in different parts of the UK and in different parts of the world as well about what it was like to have a child with Down syndrome, and what would that mean if Down syndrome was a condition that was screened out, which is quite a frightening prospect because it has an awful lot of connotations to other aspects of screening out people who are considered maybe by certain societies not to be, in inverted commas, perfect.
Absolutely. It was it was hard hitting, and it was, for somebody like myself in the situation I was in at the time to be watching it, it was very emotional. And it taught me a lot. And I think my main takeaway from it was that I don't want to be one of those people like they are in Iceland that say that these people shouldn't be part of our society. Mm-hmm. And I think that me being me, that played to my sort of steadfast kind of personality trait where I didn't want to be like that. So as much as she was talking about, this is what life is like, this is what Ollie's like, all of that, and that said a lot to me. But actually the thing that spoke to me was this 100% termination rate in Iceland.
Yeah.
Because everybody is conditioned to believe that if they are pregnant with a child with Down syndrome, that child shouldn't be born. And it enraged me, and that was part of my decision-making process, that I thought, no, I don't want to be one of those people, because that's wrong. And, the people she met that had been born with Down syndrome in Iceland that were doing art show, weren't they? And showing images and drawing pictures of people with Down syndrome was just so heartwarming for me, that I just thought, this is what I want to do. I want to carry on. I want to have this child. And through watching that documentary, I don't know if you mentioned it to us, or it's one of those suggestions because you watched this on YouTube, something else popped up, and there was the TED talk by Karen Gaffney, who's a lady. I don't know if you've seen it, Carol.
I don't think I have, no.
In America, who has Down syndrome. And she has gone through further education. She's got degrees and things. And she was doing a TED talk about her life with Down syndrome. And, and it was a bit of that don't scream me out type, talk, where she wanted to tell people that, just because she has this extra chromosome doesn't make her any less of a person to anybody else. A bit like our friend Liz Crowder and her daughter Heidi. It's great. It was just great to come across, people who, adults that have Down syndrome that are probably as outspoken as me. And I was imagining, because at that point, we didn't know whether we were going to have a girl or a boy at that weekend when we were discussing things. But, either way, I was seeing myself in those people talking.
Yeah.
Well, I could see my child doing this, because I want to stand up and say, it's not right that these children are being screened out for just because they have Down syndrome. So I felt, it really spoke to me, and Cara was very inspiring in her talk. So you should go and watch it, Caroline, if you haven't seen it.
I should. Yes, I will.
It's a fab talk, and she really inspired all of us. Mum and John and I were all sat watching it in tears. But also, it was more happy tears than anything, thinking, wow, she's such an inspiration. I just want to say thank you very much for coming on my podcast, Tea and 21 with Laura. I really appreciate it, Caroline.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been lovely to talk. It's been lovely to reminisce, actually. Thank you very much.
We've been through a lot in the last 3 years, haven't we?
We certainly have, yes.
all positive and all good.
Definitely. And it's always lovely to know that I've made a lovely friend through our mutual children's extra chromosomes.
Yes. During the weekend, John and I had lots of discussions and watched various documentaries on YouTube, which really helped us in our decision making. They put the diagnosis into real life for us and made us feel more comfortable with what life could look like with a child with Down syndrome. And it was hugely informative and helpful. And I urge anybody who is in a position to make anything that can go out on places like YouTube to do that, because it really helps families that are going through the process of an antenatal diagnosis, who have been asked by the hospital to make a decision on carrying on with a pregnancy. We talked to family members. We got various people on the phone. We spoke to John's parents. We spoke to John's sister and her partner. We spoke to my brother and his wife. And my mum came up from Yorkshire to stay with us. We watched the documentaries together with my mum. That seemed to give us all a lot of reassurance, and it helped to prompt the discussions that we were having with each other about what life could look like and the fact that life doesn't necessarily have to be over because we're expecting a child with Down syndrome. The main thing I remember from that weekend was the outpouring of love from family and friends who told us that no matter what, they were there for us. No matter how things turned out, we were loved and our child would be loved, and that we didn't need to worry. And the other thing that really remember about it was John saying to me, "It's your body, Laura. That baby is ours, but it's your body. And we don't know what strain a child with Down syndrome could have on your body, because there were talks about the placenta might struggle at points and things like that. But John said to me, I will support you, Laura, whatever your decision." And to feel that love and that support from somebody, I've never felt like that before. I've never felt like this isn't just my decision as much as John was telling me it was. It was our decision as a couple, and it had an impact on our family and friends. But it was okay to make the decision that we would carry on because everybody was going to be there for us. We were going to be there for each other. And that is exactly what has happened. Lucy is a very, very loved little girl who everybody cherishes and loves to spend time with. And that, when I look back at that weekend and those decisions that we were making and the thoughts that we were having, I wish I could. Everybody says this. I wish I could go back in time and tell myself that it'll all be okay, because it is okay. Once we'd made that decision, we called the hospital on the Tuesday and told them that we wanted to come in and have a scan, because we knew that was the next step in the process of going to carry on. The consultant who had done the CBS testing for me, he would want to do a scan and have a look at our baby. And once we'd been into the RVI and had another scan, yet another opportunity to meet our baby. During that appointment, we were told that we were asked if we would like to know the sex of the baby. We said we would, and so we were told we were having a little girl. So in addition to the scans that we'd already had, that you would already have, so we'd met our baby girl quite a few times at this point, and again that day. The first thing John and I wanted to do when we lived in that hospital was tell the world. And I have been following a lovely lady on Facebook just from that diagnosis, just from that Thursday. I had found a lady with a blog called Sarah Pree, who has a little girl called me. And I messaged her and she was really supportive about, the fact that we were making this decision, and anything we wanted to ask, we could ask her. She was really, really helpful. And I talked a little bit to her about the way that she had told the world about Marnie having an extra chromosome and the announcement that she had made. And she was happy for me to take a little bit of poetic license there and take a little bit of the inspiration from Sarah's post, use that to announce to the world with a scan, just like anybody else would, to explain that we were expecting Lucy to our wider community of family and friends, that we were going to be having a little girl who would have Down syndrome. And again, when we put that post out, Pressing's post was terrifying, thinking, what if there is negativity? What would I do? How would I cope? But actually, in reality, I didn't need to worry about anything like that. The outpouring of love and support again was incredible. And everybody was just so excited for us. And people who've known both of us separately throughout our lives were coming to tell us that they knew from our backgrounds, our personalities, what fantastic parents we would be and how they would support us in any way that we would need. And so yet again, I just felt really reassured that everything was going to be okay. Thank you for listening to the episode today. Next episode is called Complications, because life never goes to plan. Please subscribe, like, share, tell everybody about the podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening. And if you would like any links to anything that we've discussed today, please visit our website, tn21.com.
Niltoni Broadcast Network, NBN, popcorn for your ears.